congratulations for Don't Look Back.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very, very excited to have it, directing my first film and having it come out around Halloween is really cool.
So tell us, because you wrote Final Destination 1 and 2, you wrote Tamara. Where did the original idea came from for Don't Look Back?
You know what? I've always, there was a case about a woman called Kitty Genovese who was assaulted in the early, I think it was 70s or 80s in New York. And the story kind of went around that, 30 or 40 people watched from their apartments and didn't do anything. And even though that kind of myth was later debunked, that story always really stuck with me about how people couldn't help. And I did a lot of research into it. And I heard about the bystander effect and just learned a lot of things about that phenomenon. And, when you're a creative person like you have things that stick with you, and then you just kind of wait for the right story to come along. And, after Final Destination came out, I think people were, I think it kind of became what it became because people really related to the concept of not being able to cheat death. And, I was just thinking about other kind of universal concepts. And, I was out one night and I passed a couple, this is my only Good Samaritan moment, but, this guy was like, yelling and screaming and smacking his girlfriend. And, I went up and, yelled at him about it, and he ended up kicking me in the groin, which was not cool, but, some of my friends were like, oh, you shouldn't have done anything. That was stupid. And I just started thinking about like, that's such a universal question that we have when we see stuff happening. Especially now when people just seem to want to film whatever horrible thing is going on and put it on their cell phone and try to become viral. So that's the theme that really stuck with me and made me want to write this particular story. It's only gotten more relevant, I think. Like, I think we're almost at peak awfulness as far as empathy goes towards other people. Like, it seems like now is like almost the worst time that I can remember in my lifetime, where people honestly just seem to want to film stuff and not get involved. And it's almost like a spectator sport now.
Do you think people should get involved? Because, there's two sides of it now these days, because some people believe being silent is being complicit, and, being active, doing something about it is the way to go. And that's what's dividing us in society today.
Yes. And I think it's always personal, like in a situation like where there's violence involved, like you can at least call 911 before you start recording. There's like there's a baseline of human decency. It's always hard because I've always been active in causes when I can. And I try to live my life through action. So as far as, racism and homophobia and sexism and Islamophobia, like all these, divisive things that are going on in the world, I've always tried to live my life. I was raised by my mom to be this way, to treat everyone equal. It doesn't matter how rich or poor you are, like everybody is equal. And so I kind of live my life through that. I do understand the sentiment that silence, means you're complicit to a degree, but then that also puts a lot of pressure on people to like, you can use that against people to be like, well, you're not speaking out about my cause, so you're part of oppressing me. And I don't feel like that's right. I don't think that gets us anywhere. That just kind of keeps dividing us even more, I think.
Mm-hmm. What is your lure of the supernatural and death? Because everything you write and do, it's all about supernatural and death. What's your obsession with that?
You know what? I'm not. It's funny because people ask me if I'm obsessed with death, and I'm not worried about dying. I don't want to suffer for a long time, and I don't want to die before my mom lived to be 97, and I don't want to die before 97. That's it. I think my interest in the supernatural really spawned from the movie that impacted me the most, which was Nightmare on Elm Street. That movie really is like my favorite movie of all time. It really took my enjoyment of horror movies to my obsession with horror movies and loving them. And so I've always liked fantasy, like Greek and Roman mythology. I used to read all that stuff when I was young. And I do think a lot of it's escapism. I grew up, and I always say this with love because I love where I grew up and I wouldn't change my childhood for anything, but I grew up in a very racist, part of the country. you know, back in the hills of Eastern Kentucky. And so life was pretty bad. And so you had to find I think you know, fantasy and, you know, a lot of people that get into the arts, you know, that like, especially fantasy and horror, it was kind of a source of escapism for them when they were younger. I think I've done a lot of thinking about this, obviously, but I think that it's more the escapism, the fact that anything can happen, you know, and with supernatural and fantasy stuff. Like I've always loved it.
It's funny. It's ironic, is because you're afraid of death, but yet you come up with the most clever deaths and violent deaths in the film industry. I have no idea where your mind actually goes when you.
It's pretty. You know, people like meet me and they're like, "Wow, you're not creepy and crazy like I thought you'd be." But because I'm a very like happy person, I hate real life violence. I think for me, since I grew up on the genre, a lot of times it's almost me trying to like, it's almost like a science for me. It's like I want to, because it's hard to come up with an original death, you know, because if you watch a whole bunch of horror movies, pretty much everything has been done. So I try to come up with something that I can either put a twist on, or something that is that just is unexpected, you know, like taking a scene that you think is going to play it one way and putting a spin on it, or something that will kind of get under people's skin. But I don't like the gratuitous, like slow slicing people up. I like to have impactful deaths on film that are that will just get under people's skin. But I try to make sure that none of it's ever done in a mean-spirited way. Because for me, horror films are fun and entertaining, and they can be disturbing, but I try not to be like mean-spirited. Like in none of my films, like I never write like, you know, women being assaulted and, you know, brutalized, or men being brutal. You know, I don't go for the brutalization kind of horror stuff. For me, it's more about getting people to go, whoa.
Well, let's talk about your leading lady then, Courtney Bell. Why is she perfect? I mean, I like the idea that you had a leading lady that's actually a minority. I mean, that's actually rare in horror films.
It's extremely rare. And first of all, I adore Courtney. She's so talented, and I actually, you know, that's a good thing about when you do indie film, is you get to cast the people that you want. And diversity has always been important to me, and I've always written diverse characters in my scripts. But anytime I write like an African American or Latino or Asian or any kind of character in my script, they always end up casting them white. And it's just, you know, I've tried to explain it to people now when, you know, because diversity is on kind of such the forefront of conversations, is usually white is the default for every character. That's just the default that everybody goes to. So every time I send out a casting notice, even if we put all ethnicities in there, I'll get probably 99% white submissions. So I have to actually put a special calling sheet out saying, looking for Black actors, looking for Latino actors, looking for Asian actors. You know, like I have to put out a specific thing, or otherwise they'll never send them to me. So this idea that when people say, oh, well, we cast the best person for the role, it just happened to be a white person, when they kind of whitewash diverse roles, that's not true. They're just not looking. And with Courtney, I actually, because she had a small part in It Follows, so I Googled her, and she had a webpage up with a bunch of her different videos on it. And when I saw her videos, I'm like, this is Caitlin. Like, this is Caitlin. And without a doubt, the minute I saw her website, and you know, the producers were 100% behind me, you know, casting somebody. And, you know, so it was important to me, but I did find the best actress for the role. You know, so I get to say that now, but it's like, you know, you have to look for minority actors, you know, because the casting agents don't send them out when you ask for leading actors or actress submissions. They always send out their white clients. They just do. So.
Absolutely. Well, let me start wrapping things up because this is your directorial debut.
Yes.
You want to do this again? How was that experience?
It was a lot of fun. And it was I keep saying it was a great learning experience, because I've been on a lot of sets, and you think you've read all the books, and you think you know what you need to do. But once you get on set, you actually learn a lot doing it, that you're like, oh, I didn't know this. So we had a great team, and I'm absolutely, a lot of my director friends are like, you're either going to want to never direct again, or you're going to want to direct again. So I definitely want to direct again. I will be directing again.
Excellent. And one more final thought as
Yes.
I'm leading to a Final Destination. Obviously, you know this question is coming because earlier this spring, people are talking about a Final Destination reboot,
Yeah.
and you commented about that you're welcoming another reboot. But what if you were? How involved are you going to be in this reboot? And if you aren't, what ideas would you suggest that you should throw to them?
You know what? I'm not creative. I mean, I'm not involved like officially. Like I'm very close with Craig Perry, who's the producer. So I kind of always know what's going on with it. There's no advice. You know what I'm saying? Like I love the franchise. I love, I was very happy with especially the second film because I felt like it got to expand on the mythology of the movie and kind of do all the stuff I wanted to. But I've been very, I worked in the film industry. I worked at New Line Cinema for 11 years. So I know how the business is. So I've been very, happy to see what other people bring to the table as far as the sequels go. Like I thought Part 5 was one of my favorite sequels of all. And, I know there is going to be another one. They had been actively moving on it before COVID hit. So now everything's kind of on hold. So all the rumors going around with like fake this and that, like they're not doing anything until COVID is done. But if I were to go back, if I were to come back to the franchise, what I would like to do is I think we've had so much fun with Death's design as is, with the Rube Goldberg kind of way that Death gets people. I would actually like to kind of have a different design, like come up with a different way that Death gets people so that we can still have the same core concept, but it's not kind of repeating the Rube Goldberg kind of things. But that seems to be that's what people really respond to is the Rube Goldberg, like Death is, in our living room or in our kitchen. So yeah, I'm excited to see it keep going, just as a fan, this 14-year-old kid, who loved horror films in Kentucky, to have a film that's kind of has a legacy is just something I'm really grateful for. Excellent.
Well, I look forward to that, and I thoroughly enjoyed Don't Look Back. So hey, thank you very much.
I'm glad you did.
Thank you very much for this conversation. I really appreciate it.
Of course. Thank you for having me on.